Keep in mind that this story took place back in 2008. I will explain at the end why that is of relevance. It was Halloween. I'd just finished handing out candy to trick-or-treaters and was settling down to do some deep work. I had just finished university and had bought my own house, had gotten a real job, so there was a lot of work to do in the beginning. As I sat down, the phone rang. I glanced at the clock. It was around 10:30 p.m., a little late for phone calls. I picked up the phone, and on the other end, there was nothing but silence. I figured it was a wrong number, or maybe some kids playing a prank. But then, I heard faint whispering voices in the background. It sounded like people talking about what they should say, a really poorly structured prank call. "Hello?" I said. The whispering continued, and then suddenly a chilling voice cut through the silence. It was distorted.
"You shouldn't be alone on this night."
I slammed the phone down. My mind raced with thoughts of creepy urban legends and Halloween horror stories, the movie Scream in particular. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some twisted kids trying to mess with people. My phone rang again, and I hesitated for a moment before answering, but I actually felt safer by picking up the phone, having the voice in my ear instead of letting it ring and being in the unknown. I answered the phone. "Yes?" I said. It was the same silence, followed by that same spine-tingling voice.
"You can't escape,"
it whispered.
"I am coming for you."
My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. This was no ordinary prank call. It was becoming a full-blown nightmare. I hung up, my hands now slick with sweat. In my mind, I thought to myself that I could easily take on this idiot if he broke in. I was a fit guy who trained MMA, but I decided to lock all the doors and windows, double-checking that I was safe. The phone rang yet again. "Can you please stop calling? I have a lot of work to do," I said, trying to sound confident, but my voice quivered a bit.
"Oh, but I'm enjoying myself and the fun hasn't even begun yet."
I started to lose my temper and told him that he should stop hiding behind the phone and show himself. I told him that I could easily destroy him if I wanted to, and that a 1 versus 1 is no problem.
"What makes you think I am alone?"
he said. I thought he was just trying to scare me, because what else would you try to do with such prank calls late at Halloween? But
"Trick or treat,"
the voice said through the phone while it was knocking on my front door. My heart sank, and while I could hear the voice laughing over the phone, I stood against a corner in my living room looking around to make sure nobody could come from behind. As I tried to calm my racing heart, I heard a faint tapping on the window. I turned to see a shadowy figure outside wearing a grotesque mask. It felt like my body was paralyzed. I couldn't move. Not even 10 seconds later, I heard noises from the roof. Someone was walking around on the roof, so I now had a knock on my door, a tap on the window, and footsteps on the actual roof.
"Don't look so shocked. I told you I weren't alone,"
the voice said. A sound of sirens in the distance came closer. The police were on their way. The figure at the window seemed to sense that help was approaching and retreated into the darkness. My neighbor had seen the acts of the people and found it suspicious and had called the police. Within moments, the police cars pulled up to my house and officers entered the house. They searched the premises but found no one. The officers took my statement and assured me they would patrol the area throughout the night. They also advised me to stay vigilant and keep my doors and windows locked. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, this happened back in 2008, and back then, we still used phone books. It has later been brought to my attention that these psychopaths had probably scouted a house where they could get a clear view to the interior of the house from the outside, then later looked up the address in the phone book, and then called the number at that address in the phone book. Someone has been watching me from the outside while he was on the phone with me, while the rest of his friends has been harassing me. This is just a theory of mine. At the end of the day, I'm glad I had such good neighbor. It's Halloween night, the air is cool, and the streets are filled with people of all ages dressed up in crazy costumes. My friend and I, both 14 years old at the time, decided that we were too old to trick or treat, but still young enough to soak in the festive atmosphere. We weren't looking for scares, just some fun. We walked down the streets, taking in the creativity of the costumes and enjoying the lively ambiance. We noticed a person in the distance, a person dressed head to toe as a clown. It felt scary because of all the incidents that had gone viral with killer clowns roaming the streets and scaring people. But then again, it was Halloween and we didn't think much of it at first. We decided to keep on walking, and after a while we turned around and saw that the clown was not standing there anymore. It was kind of relieving. A few minutes passed and there he is again. There was something sinister about the way he was looking at us. He was just standing there with his eyes locked in at us. The discomfort grew and we changed directions, only to find that this masked pursuer kept pace with us. As soon as we moved, he tagged along with cautious steps, trying to make it look natural. At first, we tried to convince ourselves that it was just a prankster, maybe a friend trying to scare us. But as the night wore on and the figure continued to trail us, fear gripped our hearts. We decided to cut through a few alleys, thinking we could shake him off. But he was relentless. Each time we turned a corner or ducked into a new street, there he was, that face covered in makeup glaring back at us. Our throats went dry and our laughter turned to anxious whispers. It was as if he could anticipate our every move. We sought refuge in a crowded area, convinced that the masses would deter our pursuer. But to our shock, he seamlessly blended into the crowd, always keeping us within sight. At this point, my friend and I were convinced that something was seriously wrong. At one point, we couldn't see him anymore, making us think that he probably couldn't see us either, and we decided to make a run for it. As we got away from the crowd, our nerves were shot, and we were genuinely scared for our safety. In this past time, we had come quite a distance away from our homes, so we just kept running. Then, all of a sudden, the very same guy popped out of an alley, which means that he had obviously kept an eye on us the entire time. He was now blocking the way we wanted to run, so we took a detour to get home. We ran past our school, and since we practically knew the place in and out, we decided to go inside. There was a window in one of the buildings that had a lock that didn't work, so it could be opened from the outside. Once we were inside, we ran around the corridors trying to make it to the side that was closest to my house, so we could open a window out to the roof and then jump to the ground from there. We wanted to regain our energy, so we agreed to walk and not run, since we felt pretty secure in the school. On our way to the other side of the school, we went by the school's main entrance. We heard knocking on the glass door, a few lightly taps. We looked up and saw this white shadow holding 2 red balloons. We stopped walking out of fear. We saw he was about to attempt to open the door, but we don't know if he actually could open the door because as soon as we saw his hand reaching for the handle, we ran as fast as we could, no looking back, just aiming for the getaway window. We made it out of the school and sprinted back to my place. Gasping for breath, we slammed the door shut and locked it, and ran to my room upstairs, peering out the window. On the opposite sidewalk of the house, the very same clown was standing just outside my house, staring up at us. Our blood turned to ice. We yelled for my dad. Barely able to speak coherently, we pointed out the window while explaining as much as we could as fast as possible. My dad then ran downstairs while we kept looking out of the window, but as my dad approached the clown, he ran off, disappearing into the darkness. When my dad came back in, he told us to stay inside for the night. He called my friend's parents to let them know what happened and said that he would drive my friend home, or he could sleep over if he didn't want to go back outside that night. My little sister and I were staying with our grandparents on their farm for Halloween. We had been looking forward to this visit for weeks. Grandma and Grandpa lived on a remote farm, and every year there was a traveling carnival nearby for Halloween. Our excitement was through the roof as we started on a day filled with cotton candy, thrill rides, and carnival games. The carnival had a lively pumpkin festival, with a variety of pumpkins in all shapes and sizes. We got to carve our own jack-o'-lanterns, and the results were both spooky and hilarious. As the sun began to set, we climbed aboard the Ferris wheel. From the top, we enjoyed breathtaking views of the carnival lights, the farm, and the surrounding countryside. We returned home, our pockets filled with prizes we'd won at the carnival. My sister's most prized possession was a ballerina music box she'd won at one of the game booths. That thing played the sweetest but creepiest tune you can imagine, and she couldn't put it down. It was late when we finally hit the sack, but my sister, with her new music box, refused to stop playing it. The tinkling melody filled the room, and it was starting to get on my nerves. I tried to doze off, but that music was constantly playing. It was kind of creepy, even though it was a ballerina music box. That wasn't the only thing that was making noises that evening. I kept hearing screams from the barn nearby, where our grandparents had all their animals. Not human screams, but animal screams, like they were fighting. Usually when we had been here, they were quiet. I had no understanding of what it means when they scream and when they don't. But the fact that I wasn't used to the screams was unsettling. I finally fell asleep, but only for a short time. 3 loud knocks echoed through the house. I jolted awake, startled, and my sister froze with her music box mid-tune. The knocks were loud and deliberate, unlike anything we'd ever heard before. Grandpa, as confused as we were, grabbed his shotgun and headed towards the front door. He must have thought it was something urgent, maybe a neighbor in trouble. But as he swung open the door, the sight that greeted him made my sister and I anxious. On the doorstep were 3 chickens, lifeless and bloody. Their feathers were ruffled and their necks had been brutally snapped. It was a gruesome sight. But that wasn't all. Our scarecrow, which had stood guard in the field for as long as I could remember, was now a shattered mess. Its wooden frame lay splintered and broken, as if it had been attacked. All the pumpkins my grandparents grew were destroyed. Grandpa knew this wasn't some random act of nature. Someone had trespassed on our farm, slaughtered our chickens, and destroyed our scarecrow. The eerie, rhythmic tune of my sister's music box still filled the air, now accompanied by the panicked screams of the animals in the barn. We locked the doors, triple-checked the windows, and stayed awake the rest of the night, fearing that whoever had done this might come back. We never did find out who was behind that night of terror. I experienced a sketchy situation a couple of years ago on Halloween night, when I was working at this little costume store. It was a store that sold everything from costumes to decorations for any party you could imagine. Whether it was a theme party at your college or a princess-themed birthday, rows upon rows of costumes for theme parties, Halloween extravaganzas, and everything in between. Now leading up to the big day for all the kids, the store was bustling with eager customers. People trying on costumes, couples searching for matching outfits, kids picking out their favorite superheroes. As it was Halloween, of course, the store was covered in Halloween-themed decorations. I had helped with the decorations. Huge spiders crawling on the walls, spider webs, pumpkins with candlelights, ghosts and skeletons everywhere. 3 days before Halloween, the store had been bombarded with last-minute shoppers, folks searching for that perfect disguise to impress their fellow trick-or-treaters. Exhausted, I began to tidy up the rows of costumes, hanging them back in their rightful places. There was this guy, dressed up in one of the costumes from the racks. He'd slipped in earlier when the store was at its busiest, blending in seamlessly with the crowd. I remember passing by him a few times, thinking he was just another customer. But I noticed that he hid in between the rack that had matching costumes to the costume he was wearing. Thinking it was just a prankster, I played along until the last few costumers was leaving. Then I told the guy that was hiding that he had to leave. He wasn't super impressed that he didn't manage to hide better than that. But he exited the store and I could finish up for the day, fasting forward to the day before Halloween. As the last customers trickled out, I began my routine. I began to tidy up the rows of costumes, hanging them back in their rightful places. Some of the decorations and signs we had standing outside of the store had to be taken in before closing time. So I did. I began shutting off the lights and preparing to lock the door. As I stood by the door, about to lock up, it seemed as something was moving in the corner. Right there in the corner of the store was a mannequin dressed as Michael Myers. Now, this was not really something that scared me, since we have that exact mannequin always standing outside. We don't usually take it in when we close, and I don't recall that I had moved it inside. Anyways, I thought, oh well, I can leave it inside tonight. When I got to my car, I realized that I had forgotten my purse in the store. I sat in the car, contemplating whether there was anything of importance in the purse that I needed right now, because otherwise I had to turn off the alarm if I went back inside, which would take an extra 10 minutes before I could be back in my car, and I just wanted to go home. After some thinking, I found that my keys to my home was in the purse, so I had to go back inside, so I did. I got back to the store, turned off the alarm, went inside and grabbed my keys. But then, as I made my way to the front of the store, I was plunged into darkness. The lights flickered and died, and panic washed over me like a tidal wave. I fumbled for my phone, desperately trying to use its flashlight to see what was happening. What I saw next really freaked me out, or rather, what I didn't see. Michael Myers wasn't there. A soft, sinister chuckle echoing through the darkness. I could barely breathe as I scanned the store with my flashlight. The man was standing just a few feet away, and now he was closing in on me. The terror that washed over me is beyond words. I was trapped, cornered like prey in my own store. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I made a split-second decision. I hurled a nearby mannequin through the store window, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. The sound of breaking glass was like a siren, alerting anyone nearby to the danger I was in. I didn't look back. I sprinted through the shattered window, bloodied and battered but alive.